The rain that night refused to stop. It was as if the heavens were angry, pouring their grief on the earth below. Lightning flashed across the dark sky of Lagos, lighting the path of two figures moving quietly behind a huge mansion in Lekki. Their feet sank into the wet ground, and their faces were tense. The man's hands trembled as he held the shovel. The woman, dressed in a soaked wrapper, clutched a small lantern that flickered with the wind. "Dig faster," she hissed, her voice sharp with fear. "We can't let anyone see us here." The man swallowed hard. "Are you sure about this, my love? She was my mother." "Your mother?" The woman snapped. "She was the reason we were poor. She stood in our way for years. Didn't you hear what the man said? Once she's gone, our wealth will flow like river water." The man said nothing more. He dug deeper, the sound of metal striking wet soil mixing with thunder. Sweat ran down his face despite the cold. He stopped for a moment and looked at the body lying beside the pit. A frail old woman wrapped in a faded ochre cloth, her face pale and still, her hair streaked with gray. He had grown up seeing that face every morning, smiling, blessing him before school, whispering prayers into his ears. Now that same face lay lifeless because of his own hands. His wife, impatient, kicked the ground. "Hurry up. You think money will wait for us? Once this is done, we can call that man and complete the ritual." The man dug until the hole was deep enough. They lifted the body together and dropped it into the pit. The sound of the old woman's body hitting the earth echoed in his heart like thunder. He stood there staring, chest heaving. The woman grabbed the shovel and began to cover the pit with sand. "Let's go," she said coldly. "She won't bother us anymore." But as they turned to leave, lightning flashed again and the man froze. Her eyes. The old woman's eyes were open. He blinked hard, thinking it was his imagination. The next flash of light came, and this time he saw clearly. Those eyes glowed faintly, filled with something not of this world. He gasped, his heart pounding. "What's wrong?" his wife asked. He pointed with trembling hands. "Her eyes are open." The wife turned quickly, her own fear rising. She looked closely and laughed nervously. "You're imagining things. It's just lightning. Stop behaving like a child." But the man's knees shook. He could swear the woman's hand twitched slightly, as if her spirit refused to stay buried. He turned away quickly, not wanting to see more. The rain grew heavier. They rushed inside, both panting as the door slammed behind them. Inside their mansion, the air was thick and cold. The chandelier above flickered like it might go off any moment. The wife dropped the lantern on a table and took a deep breath. "It's over," she said softly. "Tomorrow, everything will change." But the man couldn't calm down. His hands shook as he poured himself a drink. He could still see his mother's eyes in his mind. He gulped down the drink, tried to drown the guilt rising in his chest. The wife walked toward him and touched his shoulder. "You did the right thing. Remember what the man said. Our life of suffering is over. You'll finally have the business you deserve. We'll own houses in Lekki Phase 1 and Banana Island. You'll forget this night soon." He nodded slowly but said nothing. He looked at her face, confident and cold, and wondered how love could turn into something this dark. The thunder rumbled again, and the lights went off completely. In the darkness, something creaked behind them, like footsteps on wet tiles. The man froze. "Did you hear that?" The woman frowned. "Hear what?" "Footsteps," he whispered. They both turned. Nothing. The living room was empty, except for the faint reflection of lightning flashing through a glass window. The wife sighed and walked upstairs. "You're just scared. Go to bed. Tomorrow we start our new life." He stood there a while longer, listening. The house was silent, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was there with them. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. The sound of rain on the roof felt like whispers. He sat up in bed and stared into the dark. He thought he heard faint singing, the kind of lullaby his mother used to sing when he was a boy. He covered his ears, but the song grew louder, carried by the wind that blew through the half-open window. His wife turned in her sleep, mumbling, "Close the window, the rain." He rose from bed slowly, heart thumping, and walked toward the window. Outside, the garden was drenched. The ground where they buried her was dark and soaked. Lightning flashed, and he saw it. A faint shape standing near the pit. He blinked, his breath caught in his throat. The figure was bent slightly, head bowed, as if weeping. The man stepped back quickly. His heart almost stopped when the figure turned. It was her, his mother. Her eyes were hollow, and water dripped down her face like tears. She raised one trembling hand toward him. He screamed. His wife woke up with a start. What happened? He pointed toward the window, but when she looked, there was nothing there. The rain had stopped. Only silence remained. I saw her, he whispered, shaking uncontrollably. She was there. The wife held him tightly, whispering, No, you didn't. You're just dreaming. You're letting guilt play tricks on your mind. He buried his face in her shoulder and wept quietly. But deep inside, he knew the truth. He hadn't imagined it. The mother they buried had looked back at him from the dark. And she was not at rest. The night went on, heavy with unseen eyes watching from the shadows. By morning, the city was bright again. The sun shone over Lecky's mansions, and cars honked in the distance. But the man couldn't shake the unease. Every corner of the house felt colder. He avoided the garden, pretending everything was normal. The wife made breakfast and hummed happily, acting as if the night never happened. She placed food on the table and smiled. Eat. You'll need your strength. The man we spoke to is waiting for our call. He said the sacrifice is complete. Wealth will start coming within days. He looked at her and forced a weak smile. But as he lifted his spoon, a cold wind brushed his face. The window was closed, yet he felt it clearly, like fingers brushing his cheek. He froze. The spoon dropped from his hand. What is it again? His wife asked, irritated. He looked toward the wall clock. It wasn't working. The hands were spinning fast, round and round. The wife followed his gaze and frowned. Maybe battery issue. She stood up to check, but as she touched the clock, it stopped suddenly, at exactly 3 a.m., the same hour they buried his mother. She stepped back, her confidence shaken for the first time. Strange, she murmured. The man looked at her and whispered, She's here. The wife forced a laugh. Don't start again. You're letting fear ruin what we've built. Once we get the money, you'll forget this nonsense. But the man wasn't convinced. He stood and walked toward the garden window. His body tensed as he saw something new. Muddy footprints leading from the backyard to the kitchen door. They were small, like those of an old woman. He turned pale. Did you see this? The wife bent to look. Her face went cold. Maybe the gardener? No gardener has been here since yesterday, he replied quietly. She looked away, forcing a smile, pretending it was nothing. But deep inside, fear was growing like a seed. That night, they both slept uneasily. The wife dreamed of money raining from the sky, but every note was wet and smeared with mud. She woke up sweating, gasping for air. The man sat beside her, eyes open, staring into space. What is it again? She whispered. He pointed toward the door. Someone knocked. She listened. Silence. No one knocked, she said. He nodded slowly, not believing her. You didn't hear it, but I did. And it was her. The next morning, both avoided the garden. The man refused to eat. He sat in the living room all day, staring at the floor. His wife grew angry. Listen, she said firmly. You must stop this madness. We can't go back. What's done is done. She's dead. Let the dead rest. Think of our future. He looked at her with hollow eyes. You think she'll rest? You don't know her. My mother never stopped fighting for what was right. The wife turned away. Enough. I'll handle this myself. I'll call the man. He'll perform another ritual to silence her spirit once and for all. She picked up her phone and walked upstairs, leaving him alone. He sat there quietly, his hands clasped together, whispering prayers he hadn't said in years. Outside, the wind blew again, rustling the curtains. The air grew cold. The smell of damp earth filled the room. He turned his head slowly and froze. By the door stood a pair of muddy feet, bare feet, old, wrinkled. He looked up. The figure's body was pale and covered in dirt. Water dripped from her hair, forming small puddles on the floor. His lips trembled. "Mother." She stared at him silently, her head slightly tilted, her lips parted slowly as if trying to speak. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The wife's voice echoed faintly from upstairs. "Who are you talking to?" The man tried to answer, but no words came. The figure took a step forward, leaving muddy footprints across the marble floor. Her voice came softly, like wind through dry leaves. "My son, you buried me, but you cannot bury my soul." He screamed, falling backward, his head hitting the floor. The wife ran downstairs, terrified. What happened? But the room was empty. The muddy footprints led straight to the garden door and disappeared. The wife looked around, shaking, clutching her chest. The man lay unconscious, pale as paper. Outside, thunder rolled again, even though the sky was clear. And somewhere in the distance, a black bird landed on the mansion's gate and began to sing the same lullaby his mother once sang. The sound floated through the air, soft and sorrowful. The woman slowly turned toward the sound, eyes wide with dread. She whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." The morning after the man saw his mother's ghost, the mansion stood strangely quiet. The wife moved around the kitchen with forced calm, pretending nothing was wrong. She cooked yam and eggs, hummed softly, and tried to keep her mind busy. But deep down, something felt wrong. The air felt heavier than usual. The smell of damp earth still lingered in the house, even though she'd sprayed air freshener everywhere. She looked at her husband sitting silently at the dining table, his eyes hollow, his hands clasped together as if praying. "You've been quiet all morning," she said, forcing a smile. "Are you not eating?" He didn't answer at first. He kept staring at the untouched plate of food. Finally, in a low voice, he said, "She was here last night." The spoon slipped from her hand and clattered on the tile floor. She straightened slowly. "Don't start again." He looked up at her, eyes bloodshot. "You think I'm lying?" She stood right there, near the door. I saw her feet, her clothes. I heard her voice. The wife sighed loudly. "Listen to me. My husband, guilt can make you see things. You've been thinking too much. You need to rest." He shook his head. "No, this is not guilt. Something followed us from that grave." She ignored him and sat down. "You need to pull yourself together. We're about to meet the man who will make our lives change forever. Remember what he said, this is only the beginning of the blessing." He gave a weak laugh. "Blessing? You call this a blessing? I can't sleep. I can't eat. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. I hear her voice asking why." The wife slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. You think I don't feel it too? But we can't stop now. If we show fear, all this will be for nothing." Silence fell between them. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound. He stared at it again, the same clock that had stopped the previous day at 3 a.m. Now, it ticked softly, the second hand moving like nothing had ever happened. The wife stood and grabbed her handbag. "Get ready. We're going to the mainland to meet the man. He'll do the final rites to seal our wealth." He hesitated. What if he's the one who brought this curse? "Curse," she laughed bitterly. "You sound like an old villager. Let's go." They drove through Lagos traffic in silence. The rain from the night before had flooded parts of the road, and Danfo splashed water onto pedestrians. The husband gripped the steering wheel tightly. His mind wasn't on the road. It was on his mother's voice echoing in his head. The wife, sitting beside him, scrolled through her phone, pretending to be calm. She glanced at him and said, "We'll stop by the Lausa first. I want to check the new property papers. We can move in once everything is done." He didn't respond. He only nodded faintly. When they reached the outskirts of Acadia, they turned into a narrow street lined with old houses and rusted zinc roofs. At the end stood a small compound with a faded signboard, Baba Folarin, spiritual healer and wealth consultant. The husband parked the car. "I don't want to go in," he said quietly. The wife glared at him. "After everything? You can't turn back now." She stepped out, her heels splashing into muddy water. He followed slowly, his chest heavy. The air smelled of incense and palm oil. Chickens clucked somewhere nearby. Inside the small house, the walls were covered with charms, cowrie shells, and pictures of strange deities. The air was thick with smoke. A deep voice spoke from behind a curtain. "You came." The man stepped out, Baba Folarin. His eyes were small and sharp, his gray beard reaching his chest. He wore a white wrapper and carried a staff decorated with feathers. "You have done well," he said in a low tone. "The sacrifice is complete, but your heart must be firm, or the spirit will find cracks to crawl through." The husband swallowed hard. "She's not resting. I saw her." Baba Folarin looked at him calmly. "The dead sometimes walk before they sleep. It is normal, but if you wish, I can strengthen the seal." The wife spoke quickly. "Do it. We want peace." He nodded and gestured for them to sit. "I will mix something. You will pour it on the grave at midnight for 3 nights. Then her spirit will be silenced forever." The husband frowned. "Midnight? Again?" The old man's eyes glinted. "Yes, wealth never comes without courage." He went to the back and returned with a calabash filled with thick red liquid. The smell was sharp metallic. He handed it to the wife. "Do not taste it. Do not spill it. Keep it close till midnight." She nodded, clutching the calabash tightly. The man turned to the husband. "And you," he said, pointing his staff, "must not fear. Spirits feed on fear. Look her in the eye if she comes again. Show her you are no longer a child. You are a man of wealth now." The husband's lips trembled. "But she's my mother." The old man's expression hardened. "She was, but you chose a different path. The living must move forward." They left quietly. Outside, the sky was heavy with clouds again, as if rain threatened to fall. The husband looked back at the small compound and felt a chill. Back home, the mansion looked darker than usual. The wife placed a calabash on the dining table. "We'll go out at midnight," she said. He nodded weakly. As night came, the wind howled louder than before. The trees behind the house swayed like they were whispering secrets. The husband sat alone in the living room, staring at the calabash. He could almost hear faint whispers coming from it. The wife came down the stairs wearing a white wrapper. "It's time." He stood slowly, his body heavy with dread. They walked out to the garden. The moon was half hidden by clouds. The soil where they buried his mother looked freshly wet again, even though there had been no rain. The wife bent down and poured the red liquid on the ground. The smell grew stronger, choking. She coughed but kept pouring until the calabash was empty. Then silence. Suddenly, the wind stopped. The air grew still, too still. Then came the sound, faint at first, like someone breathing beneath the earth. The wife froze. The husband stepped back slowly. The ground moved. The soil shifted slightly, just a little bump, like something was trying to come out. The wife screamed and dropped the calabash. It shattered, splashing the last drops of red liquid on her feet. They ran inside, slamming the door behind them. The wife panted heavily, holding her chest. "What was that?" The husband didn't answer. He stood still, staring through the glass door toward the garden. Mud was slowly creeping up the glass, as if invisible hands were dragging across it from outside. He grabbed his wife's hand. "We have to leave. Tonight." She shook her head. "No. If we run, the spirit will follow. We have to finish what we started." He turned on her, his eyes wild. "Finish? You call that finishing? You brought a curse into this house." They argued until their voices echoed through the mansion. Then a loud crash interrupted them. The chandelier fell from the ceiling, shattering into pieces. Glass flew everywhere. The wife screamed. The husband pulled her back. "Get upstairs," he shouted. They ran up the stairs, panting. But halfway up, a cold wind blew through the hallway. The candles on the wall went out one by one. The house was plunged into darkness. Then came the sound again, soft footsteps on the marble floor below. Slow, steady, wet. The wife clutched his arm. "She's inside." He turned around slowly. Downstairs, near the entrance, stood a faint figure. The old woman. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. She stood still, head tilted, watching them. The husband whispered, "Mother?" Her voice floated up the stairs, calm and sorrowful. "My son, why do you fear me? Didn't you promise to build me a house one day? Didn't you say I would live with you forever?" He trembled, tears in his eyes. "Please forgive me." But the wife screamed, "Leave us alone." The spirit turned her head slowly toward the wife. "You," she said softly, "you fed me death." The wife stumbled backward. "It wasn't me, it was him." He agreed. The spirit raised her hand, and the lights flickered. The husband fell to his knees, crying, "Please, mother, I didn't want this. I was weak." The old woman took one slow step forward. The air grew cold. A weak child is worse than an enemy. Then she vanished, gone like smoke. Silence filled the house again. The wife collapsed, gasping for air. The husband crawled toward her. "She's gone." The wife looked around, trembling. "No, she's not. She's just beginning." They stayed awake till morning, unable to close their eyes. By sunrise, the husband looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. The wife's eyes were red and swollen. She called Baba Follern again, her voice shaking. It didn't work. She came again. The man on the other end was silent for a while. Then his voice came low and calm. "The spirit is strong, because the heart of the son is guilty. If he does not repent completely, she will keep returning. There's one last step, but it will cost more." "How much?" she asked quickly. 50 million, the man replied. "And a life." The wife froze. "What do you mean, a life?" The old man chuckled softly. "The spirit of the mother must be replaced. A new soul must take her place in the earth." The wife's hand shook. "No, no more deaths." "Then suffer," he said coldly, and ended the call. The wife dropped the phone, shaking. The husband asked weakly, "What did he say?" She forced a smile. "He said we must stay strong, that it will soon pass." She lied. Days passed. The house grew colder. Every mirror in the mansion cracked on its own. The maids quit after one said she saw an old woman standing in the hallway at midnight. The wife started hearing whispers in her ears whenever she closed her eyes. "You can't silence me." She tried to pray, but even her prayers turned into screams. The husband stopped going out. He sat all day in the dark, talking to himself. He spoke to his mother's chair, begging for forgiveness that never came. One night, he found a photo of her in his drawer, the one taken at his wedding. He stared at it for hours. Tears dripped down his face. Why did I listen to her? Why did I let greed blind me? The photo suddenly fell from his hand, and he gasped. The glass frame cracked, not from his touch, but from inside, like something pressed against it. He picked it up slowly. The picture had changed. His mother's smiling face now looked sad. Her eyes were black holes. He screamed and threw it against the wall. The glass shattered. The wife ran in. "What happened?" He pointed at the pieces on the floor. "She's inside everything. Every mirror, every picture. She's everywhere." The wife covered her ears. "Stop it." But deep down, she knew it was true. That night, when the clock struck 3 again, a loud knock echoed through the mansion. One knock, then another, then silence. They held each other, trembling. Then the voice came, calm and steady, from outside the door. "My children, open the door." The wife began to cry. "She's here again." The man whispered, "Don't move, don't answer." But the door creaked slowly on its own and swung open. Cold wind swept through the house. The mother's faint figure stood in the doorway, smiling sadly. "Children, are you not happy to see me?" The wife screamed and ran upstairs. The husband stood frozen, unable to move, as the spirit took a step forward. "Come, my son," she whispered. "Let me bless you one last time." He fell to his knees, shaking violently. "Please, mother, don't touch me." But she reached out slowly, her hand glowing faintly. When her fingers brushed his forehead, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. The wife heard his scream from upstairs and ran down, but the room was empty. Only muddy footprints led to the back door again. She fell to her knees, sobbing. No, no, please don't take him. Outside, thunder rumbled again, and on the window, written in mud, were words that made her heart stop. A mother's tears never dry. She screamed until her voice broke, her body shaking uncontrollably. The chandelier above her flickered once more, then went dark completely. Somewhere in the distance, a black bird crowed 3 times before the night swallowed the sound. The morning after her husband vanished, the mansion felt like a tomb. The wife sat on the floor of the living room, eyes swollen from tears, hair scattered, wrapper loosely tied around her chest. The air smelled of candle wax and fear. Every shadow in the house seemed alive. She had searched every corner, the rooms, the kitchen, the garden, but there was no sign of him, only the muddy footprints leading to the back gate and stopping there, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. She sat trembling, her hands shaking as she held her phone. She wanted to call the police, but what would she say? That her husband disappeared after his dead mother's ghost touched him? No one would believe her. They would call her mad. So she sat still, rocking slightly, whispering to herself, "He'll come back! He'll come back!" The morning light slowly filtered through the curtains. The sound of the city waking up filled the distance. Cars honking, hawkers shouting, "Ajeej bread." Somewhere down the road, a generator humming faintly from a neighbor's house. But inside that mansion, it felt like another world cut off from the living. Then, just as she began to drift into an uneasy half-sleep, her phone rang. She jumped. Her hands trembled as she looked at the screen. It was his number. Her heart thumped hard in her chest. She answered quickly. "Hello, hello. Where are you?" she shouted. There was silence on the other end for a long moment, then a faint voice, weak, distant, trembling. "Don't come looking for me." Her eyes widened. "Where are you? Please. I thought you were." "I'm fine," the voice interrupted softly. "Just don't come here. Stay away from the garden. Stay away from her." The call ended abruptly. She stared at the phone in disbelief. His voice sounded strange, almost hollow, as if echoing from far away. She tried calling back, but the line said, "Number not reachable." For a long time, she sat frozen. Then she wiped her tears, stood up, and said to herself, "No, I won't let this destroy me." She went upstairs, showered, dressed neatly in a bright ochre gown, and applied makeup to hide her swollen eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You are strong. You are beautiful. You will rise." The moment she stepped outside, the sun hit her face like a slap of life. She took a deep breath and forced a smile. She called a driver from her phone and told him to take her to Victoria Island. If her husband was gone, she thought she would at least make the wealth worth it. She had suffered too long to give up now. By noon, she sat in a tall glass building, the office of a real estate company they'd been negotiating with before everything turned dark. The man across from her smiled warmly. "Madam, I was expecting both of you," he said. She forced a polite laugh. "He had an emergency, but we're still interested in the Lecky property." "Of course," the man said, showing her the documents. "You can sign on his behalf if you have the joint authorization." She nodded and signed with shaking hands. When she left the building, she felt a strange rush of power. The papers in her bag made her feel alive again. The driver opened the car door for her, and she smiled faintly. "Home," she said softly. But as they drove back to the crowded streets of Lagos, she began to notice something odd. Everywhere she looked, she saw old women, selling oranges, sweeping gutters, begging by the roadside, all old women with wrinkled faces. And each time she looked at one, the woman would raise her head and meet her eyes directly. She tried to ignore it, turn her face toward the window, but it happened again. Another old woman at a bus stop, staring straight at her, lips moving silently as if whispering something. Her skin prickled. She turned to the driver. "Do you see them?" The driver glanced at her in the mirror. "See who, madam?" She looked back quickly. The bus stop was empty. "Never mind," she muttered, sitting back in her seat. When she reached the mansion, the gate was slightly open. She frowned. She didn't remember leaving it that way. The driver helped her carry her bag in, but she told him to leave quickly. She didn't want anyone else inside. As soon as he drove off, she turned toward the house and froze. The front door was open. She stepped closer slowly. "Hello?" she called out. No answer. Her feet made soft sounds against the tiles as she walked in. The air was colder than it should have been. Something smelled faintly of wet soil again. Her eyes fell on the dining table. There, on top of it, sat the same calabash they'd shattered that night. But it was whole again, perfect, and inside it was a single flower, fresh, red, and dripping water. Her mouth went dry. She took a step back, shaking her head. No, this can't be. Then, faintly, from upstairs, she heard laughter. It was her husband's voice. She froze, heart racing. Slowly, she climbed the stairs. The laughter came again, low and broken, like someone talking to himself. When she reached her bedroom door, she pushed it open and gasped. Her husband sat on the floor, facing the wall. His hair was messy, his clothes torn. He turned slowly when he heard her. His eyes were blank. "Where have you been?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. He smiled faintly. "I've been home. Didn't you see me?" She stared in disbelief. "I searched everywhere. I called you. You!" He stood up slowly, cutting her off. "She brought me back. She said I can't leave until I make things right." The wife's heart pounded. "Who brought you back?" He smiled wider, a strange, empty smile. "Mother." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Stop saying that. She's gone." "She's here," he whispered. "She never left." He pointed toward the corner of the room. She turned her head slowly, and her breath caught in her throat. In the corner, sitting quietly on their chair, was the old woman. Her hands rested calmly on her knees, her eyes gentle but deep. Her headscarf was damp, and her wrapper was covered in faint traces of soil. "Good afternoon, my daughter," she said softly. The wife stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. "No, you're dead. You're not real." The old woman smiled faintly. "I was dead, but Mother's love never dies. I came to remind you of what you took from me." The husband fell to his knees beside her. "Mother, please forgive us. We didn't mean." The old woman turned to him with a gaze that silenced him. "You killed me with your hands. You buried me with your heart. Now I will bury your peace." The wife screamed. "Please, we didn't mean to. It was the man, the one who told us, Baba Folarin." The old woman's eyes darkened. "The man you served is not your God. You made your choice." She stood up slowly. As she moved, her feet left wet footprints on the polished floor. "You will have everything you ever wanted, but it will destroy you." Then she vanished. The room fell silent again. The husband collapsed completely, sobbing into his hands. The wife backed away, shaking violently. "We have to go. We can't stay here." He didn't move. She ran to the closet, grabbed a small bag, stuffed money, jewelry, and documents inside. "We'll go to Ibadan. We'll stay at your uncle's house." When she turned back, her husband was gone again. She screamed his name, ran around the room, down the hall, into the living room. Nothing. The front door was wide, open once more. She ran outside, barefoot, into the street. People turned to look at her, but she didn't care. She waved down a Kiki driver. "Take me to the park," she shouted. The man hesitated. "Madam, are you all right?" "Just go," she cried. As the Kiki sped through the streets, she kept glancing behind, convinced something was following her. Every car horn made her flinch. Every face she saw looked faintly like the mother's. By late evening, she reached the Ibadan Park. She bought a ticket and sat in the bus, still shaking. She held her bag tightly to her chest. The bus filled up slowly. A woman selling plantain chips passed by, calling out, "Buy your chips, oh!" The wife looked at her absent-mindedly and froze. The woman's face looked exactly like the old mother's. Her heart stopped. She blinked hard, but the woman was gone. She turned to the man sitting beside her. "Did you see that woman?" He frowned. "What woman?" She gripped her bag tighter. The bus started moving. The road stretched long and dark ahead, lined with trees and flickering lights. She tried to close her eyes, to breathe, to calm herself. But as soon as she drifted off, a cold hand brushed her cheek. She gasped and opened her eyes. But everyone in the bus was asleep. Her heart pounded. She looked out the window and saw something in the darkness. A figure walking beside the moving bus. An old woman, keeping pace easily, her wrapper fluttering, her eyes glowing faintly. The wife screamed. The driver hit the brakes, and the bus stopped. Everyone woke up confused. "What happened?" someone asked. She pointed outside, shaking violently. "There's someone there." The driver got out with a flashlight, looked around, then came back. "Madam, there's nobody there." She looked again. The road was empty. They continued driving, but she could no longer close her eyes. She sat rigid till they reached Ibadan. When she arrived, she went straight to her husband's uncle's house in Bodija. The man, an old retired teacher, opened the gate, surprised. "Ah, my daughter, what are you doing here at this hour? Where's my nephew?" She broke down crying. He's gone, sir." He helped her inside gently, gave her water and made her sit. "Calm down and tell me what happened." Through sobs, she told him everything about the mother, the ritual, the grave, and the strange appearances. When she finished, the old man sat quietly, shaking his head. "You children of today have forgotten that no matter how far you go, you cannot run from your roots. You killed your mother for money? And do you know what that means?" She wept harder. "Please help me. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I just want peace." The old man sighed deeply. "There is no peace without confession. You must go back, dig up the truth, return her properly." "I can't go back there," she cried. "Then you will never rest," he said calmly. That night, she lay awake on the couch, trembling. The old man slept soundly in his room, but she kept hearing faint knocking on the window. She sat up, afraid to look. The knocking came again, 3 soft knocks, slow and steady. She turned her head slowly. Through the thin curtain, she saw a faint shape standing outside. An old woman. The wife screamed, pierced the night. The old man rushed out with a lantern. "What is it?" But the window was empty. He looked at her, breathing hard. "You have to end this. Tomorrow we go back to Lagos." The next morning, they left early. The journey was silent. The wife sat in the back seat, gripping her bag, eyes wide open. She refused to look out the window. When they reached Lagos, the mansion looked deserted. The gate creaked as the old man pushed it open. "Stay behind me," he said. They stepped into the compound. The air felt heavy again. The garden was overgrown, the soil near the grave darker than before. The old man went closer, knelt down, and whispered a short prayer. "If you are here, woman, let your soul rest." The wind blew softly, carrying the faint sound of humming, the same lullaby the husband used to hear. The wife fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably. "Please forgive us. I was blind." Suddenly, the ground moved again. The old man jumped back. The soil shifted once more, slowly, and then stopped. A single hand, pale and wrinkled, pushed out of the earth. The wife fainted instantly. The old man shouted, "Blood of Jesus," and stumbled backward. When he looked again, the hand was gone. The soil was flat, calm, as if nothing had happened. He carried the fainted wife inside, laid her on the couch, and sat beside her trembling. Then he heard it, soft footsteps upstairs. He looked up slowly. At the top of the staircase stood the husband, alive, but his eyes were not normal. They were dark, empty, and cold. He smiled faintly. "Welcome home, uncle." The old man's mouth fell open. "You're alive?" The husband nodded slowly. "Mother brought me back." The old man's hand shook. "What do you mean?" The husband stepped closer, his smile widening unnaturally. "She said our kingdom must stand before it falls." The old man backed away slowly, fear gripping him. "What kingdom?" But the husband only laughed softly. "The one built on her grave." He turned his head toward the wife, who was still unconscious, and whispered, "She'll wake soon. Then we'll finish what we started." The old man felt cold all over. He could tell this wasn't the same nephew he knew. Something else was inside him. Outside, the black bird landed on the mansion gate again, watching silently. Inside, the laughter of the dead mother echoed faintly through the halls. And as the candlelight flickered weakly in the room, the husband whispered to himself, smiling like a man possessed. Mother said wealth must flow like river water. The old man slowly reached for his Bible and began to pray under his breath, his voice trembling. But deep down he knew it was already too late. The mansion was silent, except for the trembling voice of the old uncle praying. His Bible shook in his wrinkled hands. Each word he spoke felt swallowed by the thick air. "Father, deliver this house from every spirit of darkness," he whispered, but his voice broke halfway through the sentence. The candles flickered violently, shadows moving like living things across the walls. The husband stood in the middle of the room, barefoot, his head slightly tilted as if listening to someone who wasn't there. His white shirt clung to his body, wet with sweat though the air was cold. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost childlike. "Uncle, do you remember when Mother used to fry akra by the roadside?" The old man paused, lowering the Bible. "Yes," he said cautiously. "She used to sing while frying," the husband continued, smiling faintly. "She said her song made the oil obey her. But when she stopped singing, everything she touched burned." He looked up slowly, his eyes dark and empty. "Uncle, the oil is burning again." The old man took a step back. "My son, come closer. Let us pray together." But the husband only laughed, a soft, eerie laugh that made the old man's heart pound. "You still don't understand. There's no prayer strong enough to silence a mother's tears." At that moment, the wife stirred on the couch. She moaned softly, blinking her eyes open. Her voice came weakly. Where am I?" The old man rushed to her side. "You fainted, my daughter. Stay still." She looked around quickly, eyes landing on her husband. She gasped and clung to the old man. "He's not himself. Don't let him come near me." The husband tilted his head again, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "You're awake. Good. Mother said we must all sit together for dinner tonight." The wife's breath caught in her throat. "Dinner?" He nodded slowly. "She said she'll cook." The old man's hands shook harder. "Your mother is dead, my son. Stop saying this madness." But the husband's tone changed, deeper, echoing slightly, as if two voices were speaking through him. "No, Baba Ade. She's not dead. She's right here. Can't you feel her walking on the tiles?" The old man dropped his Bible and reached for his anointing oil. "In the name of Jesus Christ." Before he could finish, the candles went out all at once. The room fell into darkness. The wife screamed. A cold wind rushed through the house, carrying the faint smell of wet earth. The sound of footsteps echoed again, slow, dragging steps from the staircase. The husband turned toward the sound with a strange smile on his lips. "She's coming." The old man whispered, "Blood of Jesus," as he grabbed the wife's hand. "Run." But before they could move, a dim glow appeared at the top of the stairs. The outline of a figure slowly descended, bare feet, wrapped in a torn ankara cloth. The mother. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, but her eyes burned faintly in the darkness. "My children," she said softly, her voice filling the room. "You still sit in my house, eat from my plate, and sleep under my roof after burying me beneath it?" The wife shook her head violently. "No, no, please, forgive us." The old man stepped forward, holding out the oil. "In the name of the living God." But the moment a drop fell from the bottle, the wind blew so strong it snuffed the remaining candlelight. The old man was thrown backward, hitting the wall hard. The wife screamed again and crawled to his side, trying to wake him. He groaned weakly, eyes rolling back. The husband slowly walked toward the old woman. "Mother, I'm ready," he said in that strange double voice. "Ready for what?" she asked gently. "To make things right." The wife struggled to her feet, sobbing. "Please, stop this. You're scaring me." The mother turned her gaze toward her, and the wife felt her knees weaken. The old woman's voice became cold. You thought you could buy peace with blood? You took my life for coins that will soon turn to dust. The wife felt the floor, shaking. I'll return everything. I swear. It's not your money she wants, said the husband without looking at her. It's balance. The air grew colder. The lights flickered faintly as the mother extended one hand. The husband's body began to shake violently, his head jerking as if something was pulling him apart from the inside. The wife screamed and tried to reach him, but an invisible force pushed her backward. She hit the wall and fell, gasping. The old man regained consciousness just enough to see the husband collapsing. He crawled toward the fallen Bible, flipping it open with trembling fingers. "Father, let your mercy speak," he shouted. At that instant, a blinding flash filled the room. The windows shattered, and the mother vanished. The husband lay still on the ground. The wife crawled to him, sobbing, "Wake up, please." His chest rose slowly. He was alive, but barely. He opened his eyes weakly and whispered, "She's not gone. She's inside me now." The old man felt sweat dripping down his back, despite the cold. He stood shakily. "We must take him to church. Now!" They lifted him together, dragging him to the car. The wife kept crying uncontrollably, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted a better life." When they reached the street, people stared at them in confusion. The husband sat in the back seat, staring blankly out the window, whispering under his breath. The wife sat beside him, trembling. The old man drove, muttering prayers nonstop. As they turned onto the main road, traffic lights blinked red, even though there was no power. The husband's whispers grew louder. "She's everywhere. She's in the wind, in the water, in the trees." The wife covered her ears. "Stop it," the old man shouted. "Hold him." But it was too late. The husband suddenly reached forward, grabbed the steering wheel, and yanked it sharply. The car swerved. Tires screeched. Metal clashed. Then everything went dark. When the wife opened her eyes again, her head throbbed. The car was upside down. She crawled out through the broken window, coughing. The air smelled of petrol. The old man lay motionless beside the car. She screamed his name, shaking him, but he didn't move. Her heart pounded as she turned to look for her husband. He stood a few meters away, unharmed, staring up at the sky. His face looked calm, too calm. "Are you okay?" she cried. He turned to her slowly. "She saved me." Her stomach turned cold. "What are you saying?" She said, "The others can rest now." "But not us." The wife stepped back, terrified. "You're scaring me." He smiled faintly. "You can't run from a bond of blood. We are tied forever." He began walking toward her, step by step, his eyes glowing faintly in the fading daylight. She turned and ran down the road barefoot, crying for help. A few drivers slowed down, staring, but none stopped. She ran until her legs gave out, and she collapsed by the roadside. By the time she looked back, he was gone. That night, she went to a small Catholic church in Acadia. She burst through the doors, crying uncontrollably. The priest rushed to her side. "Madam, what happened?" She fell at his feet. "Please help me. My husband is not himself. We killed his mother, and now her spirit won't leave us alone." The priest froze. "You did what?" She told him everything, every detail, as lightning flashed outside the church. When she finished, the priest crossed himself and said quietly, "You have opened a door that only confession and restitution can close. You must rebury her properly. You must cleanse the land." She nodded, shaking violently. "I'll do anything." He gave her holy water and told her to return with him the next morning. "We'll go together," he promised. But when morning came, she received a message on her phone. No number, no name, only words. "You don't need the priest. I already called him." Her heart skipped. She rushed outside, but the priest's car was parked by the road, doors open, engine running. No one inside. She screamed and ran back toward her car, but stopped cold. In the driver's seat sat her husband, smiling faintly. She dropped the bottle of holy water. "How did you—" He turned to face her slowly. Mother said we should go home together. I'm not going anywhere with you, she shouted, stepping back. He got out of the car, his voice soft and calm. You can't escape. The grave is calling. You buried her with your hands. Now you must dig with them. She ran. He followed slowly, almost leisurely, as if knowing she couldn't go far. She ran through the streets until she reached the edge of the lagoon bridge. Cars rushed by, horns blaring. She turned around, tears streaming down her face. Please, let me go. He smiled. She's waiting for us. She looked into the dark waters below. For a moment, she thought she saw something moving in the water, an old woman's face staring up at her. She screamed and fell to her knees. Her husband stopped a few feet away, his expression suddenly softening. You can end this, he whispered. You can still make peace. How? She cried. Dig her out? Before she could answer, he stiffened suddenly, eyes widening. A strange sound came from his throat, and he dropped to his knees. His body convulsed, mouth foaming slightly. The wife rushed to him, screaming his name. Please, don't die. Not like this. He looked at her with trembling lips. She's behind you. The wife froze. She turned slowly and gasped. The mother stood there, water dripping from her hair, her eyes filled with sorrow and fire. My children, she whispered. The time has come. The ground beneath them began to shake. Cars screeched to a halt as people screamed, thinking it was an earthquake. The wife stumbled, clutching her chest. The husband reached toward his mother weakly. Please forgive me. The old woman raised her hand, and a fierce wind surrounded them. For a brief moment, everything went silent. Then, the husband's body went limp. The wife screamed his name again and again, shaking him, but he didn't move. His head tilted to the side, eyes still open. Then the mother's voice came faintly through the wind. A kingdom built on blood must fall by blood. The wind stopped. The mother vanished again. The wife fell beside her husband's body, crying until she couldn't breathe. People gathered around, whispering. Someone called the police. Someone else took pictures. But she didn't hear them. Her mind was gone, broken. When the officers arrived, they pulled her away gently, asking questions she couldn't answer. All she kept saying over and over was, She's not done yet. She's not done. That night, as a policeman drove away with her inside, the camera of a bystander captured something behind her on the bridge, a faint figure of an old woman standing in the shadows, watching. And when lightning flashed across the sky, the woman's lips moved in silence. The next second, she was gone, but the echo of her voice lingered in the air, chilling and certain. The dead have not finished speaking. The night after the bridge incident, Lagos was restless. The rain came down in sheets, washing over the city like tears. The sound of thunder rolled across the lagoon, echoing through the empty streets. In a police station near Acadia, the wife sat on a wooden bench, wrapped in a blanket that couldn't warm her. Her eyes were empty. She hadn't spoken a full sentence since the officers brought her in. Every few minutes, one of them would look at her through the glass and shake his head. She just keeps whispering. One of the constables said quietly, Same thing, over and over. She's not done yet. The senior officer sighed. People of this Lagos, they do things they don't understand. Now see. He walked into the room slowly. Madam, he said gently, we just need to understand what happened. Where's your husband's body? The woman didn't answer. She stared straight ahead at nothing. Her lips moved faintly. The officer leaned closer. What are you saying? Her whisper was low, but clear. She took him. She said the kingdom must fall. The officer frowned and stepped back. Kingdom? Which kingdom? But she didn't answer. That night, they locked her in a small cell to rest. The generator hummed outside. The corridor light flickered. The rain beat against the windows. At midnight, a constable making rounds heard something strange, a soft voice singing. It was coming from her cell. He frowned and went closer. The song was an old Yoruba lullaby, the same one mothers used to sing to their children before bedtime, the same one his own mother used to sing when he was a boy. He smiled faintly, then stopped. How could she know that song? He peeked through the small window on the cell door. The woman sat in the corner, still wrapped in her blanket. But standing beside her was another figure. Older, darker, barely visible in the dim light. The constable's blood ran cold. He stumbled back, heart pounding. He blinked hard and looked again. The second figure was gone. Only the woman remained, her head bowed. He ran back to the guardroom, breathing hard. Oga! Oga! Something is inside that cell. The others laughed. You've been watching too many Nollywood films. Go back. But when they checked in the morning, the woman was gone. The cell door was locked from the outside, the key still hanging on the hook. Only a puddle of muddy water remained where she had sat. That same morning, far away in Lekki, people began to whisper about strange things happening around the late couple's mansion. The gate man from a neighboring compound swore that every night around 3, he heard footsteps and the sound of a woman sweeping the yard. But whenever he looked, the compound was empty. The caretaker sent to lock up the place refused to go in. I saw her, he said, trembling, an old woman in wrapper. She was sitting on the steps, singing. She smiled at me. By noon, a small crowd gathered outside the mansion. The news spread fast, the dead woman that walks. Some said she was looking for her son's soul. Others said she was guarding her land. Mothers told their children not to pass near the gate after dark. That evening, a wealthy businessman came to see for himself. He was interested in buying the property. Ghost or no ghost, he laughed. This is Lekki. Land is land. But as he entered the compound, the air grew cold. The scent of wet soil filled his nose. He walked to the front door, looked around, and shook his head. Nonsense. Then he noticed muddy footprints, bare feet, small and old, leading from the gate to the garden and stopping at the exact spot where the grave had been. He swallowed hard, turned, and left without another word. From that day, no one else came to the mansion again. In Ibadan, the husband's uncle sat outside his small house in Bodija, staring at the evening sky. His face was tired. His heart still trembled when he thought of what had happened. He hadn't gone near Lagos again. He prayed every day for peace, for the dead and for the living. But some nights, the wind would carry a woman's laughter faintly into his room. One night, he woke up to find a folded paper slipped under his door. No one had knocked. No footsteps. Just a note. He picked it up with shaking hands. It read, "The kingdom has fallen. The mother walks." He froze, unable to breathe. He packed his few belongings and left for his village the next morning. I can't stay in this city again, he told his neighbors. Meanwhile, in a small town near Abeokuta, a strange woman arrived one Sunday morning. She looked thin, weak, and tired. She wore a plain wrapper and carried a small black bag. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights. She went to the church compound and knelt by the door before anyone else arrived. When the pastor came out, he saw her and paused. "My daughter, are you all right?" She lifted her head slowly. "I came to make peace." He looked closely. Her face was familiar. He had seen her picture in the newspapers. The woman whose husband died mysteriously on the bridge. "You," he began, stepping back. She bowed her head. "Please, I have nowhere else to go. I want to confess." He helped her inside and gave her water. "Tell me everything." She did. From the beginning. The greed, the ritual, the grave, the mother's voice, the return, the possession, the fall. She spoke until her voice broke, and tears soaked her wrapper. The pastor listened quietly. When she finished, he sighed deeply. "What you have done cannot be undone, but mercy still speaks. You must seek forgiveness from the one you wronged." She looked up slowly. "How?" He said, "You must go back to her grave. You must pray until morning. Alone." Her hands shook. "I'm afraid." He looked into her eyes. "Fear is the first sign that the heart is not free. Go tonight. Take nothing but water and this Bible." She nodded weakly. That night, when the moon rose, she returned to the old mansion. The gate creaked open by itself. The air was cold, though it was dry season. The house was silent, except for the sound of crickets. She walked to the garden slowly, barefoot, clutching the Bible to her chest. The soil where they had buried the mother looked untouched now, flat and still. But the air above it shimmered faintly, like heat rising from the ground. She knelt. "Mama," she whispered, "I'm here. I've come to beg." The wind blew softly, brushing her face. The smell of flowers and earth filled her nose. She closed her eyes and began to pray. "Lord, if you can still hear me, let her forgive me. I was blind, I was foolish. I killed the one who gave me life." The ground felt warm under her knees. She kept praying, her tears soaking the soil. After a long silence, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She froze. Her heart raced. A gentle voice behind her, "My daughter, why are you crying?" She turned slowly. It was the mother. But this time, her eyes were soft, kind, almost glowing with light. The woman fell on her face, crying uncontrollably. "Please forgive me. Please." The old woman sighed softly. "You were lost, but pain brings wisdom." She reached down and lifted her gently. "Stand." The wife stood, trembling. The mother smiled faintly. "I have walked enough nights. I have seen the pain my tears caused. I forgive you." The wife gasped, choking on sobs. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you. But forgiveness has a price," the mother said quietly. The wife's smile faded. "What price?" The old woman looked toward the house. "You must tell the world my story. You must speak so others will not forget." "I will," the woman cried. "I'll tell everyone. I swear." The mother nodded. "Then my spirit will rest." The wind blew gently again. Her image began to fade, dissolving like mist in the moonlight. The wife reached out, trying to touch her, but her hand met only air. "Mama," a faint voice answered. "Be good to the mothers that remain." Then silence. The night became still. The moonlight brightened. The air grew warm again. The woman fell to her knees, crying with relief. For the first time in months, she felt peace in her chest. When dawn came, she was still kneeling there, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. When the neighbors came by later, they found her still in that position. They called out to her, but she didn't answer. Her face was calm, her lips still curved in a faint smile. The Bible lay open beside her, the pages fluttering in the morning breeze. No one touched her for a long time. Later, when they buried her properly near the same garden, the air smelled faintly of flowers, though no one had planted any. The mansion was finally quiet. Weeks passed. The story spread across Lagos like wildfire. People spoke of the woman who begged the dead for forgiveness and found peace. They said the mother's spirit was finally at rest. The mansion became a small shrine where people came to pray for mercy. Mothers brought their children there, whispering, "Never forget who carried you." The priest who examined the place said the soil was blessed. No plant there ever withered again. And on quiet nights, some said they could still hear the faint voice of an old woman humming a lullaby, the same song that once filled a small kitchen in Ibadan. A song of patience, of sacrifice, of love that death could not bury. No one was afraid of it anymore. They said it was a reminder, because in every corner of the city, in every home where children raised their voices against their mothers, people would whisper the story. Remember the couple who killed their mother for money, and how her return shattered their kingdom. Then the elders would add softly, "You can bury a body, but never a mother's heart." And somewhere, far beyond the noise of Lagos, the wind would carry a gentle tune, soft, warm, forgiving, like the echo of a woman finally at peace. The story began to move through Lagos like the harmattan wind, slow at first, then unstoppable. People whispered it in buses, told in salons, and repeated it at market stalls. At first, it was just gossip, another tale among many. "Did you hear about the woman who begged her dead mother for forgiveness?" One woman asked another while buying tomatoes in mile 12. "Ah, they said her spirit used to walk the streets at night, oh. But when the daughter confessed, she finally rested." Soon, the story took on a life of its own. No one knew the real names anymore. The husband became the greedy son, the wife became the crying woman, and the mother was now known as I, Mother the Earth. Children whispered her name before sleeping. Old women used it as warning. If you disrespect your mother, I will visit you, they would say, wagging their fingers at stubborn children. In Lagos, markets that were once filled with chaos grew quiet when the story was told. Traders would pause to listen, crossing themselves or murmuring, "Yes, oh." In Ibadan, elders began to tell the tale at moonlight gatherings. Under the mango trees, children sat in circles as an old storyteller, her gray hair wrapped in a white scarf, told the legend. They say she was poor but kind. The woman's voice would tremble as she spoke. She gave everything to her only son. When hunger entered their home, she gave him her food. When cold came, she gave him her wrapper. But when riches called, he gave her nothing but betrayal. The children's eyes widened. "What happened, Mama?" "She died by his hand," the storyteller continued. But the grave did not close her heart. Her love followed him into his mansion. Her forgiveness found them in their madness. And when she returned, the earth itself wept. The children would shiver as the wind moved through the trees, as if the mother herself passed among them. In the days that followed, strange kindness began to bloom around the city. Sons who had not called their mothers in years suddenly picked up their phones. Daughters who had shouted at their mothers knelt down to apologize. In homes where bitterness once sat, forgiveness found space to breathe. One morning, a man named Tund, a taxi driver in Ojota, woke up shaking. He had dreamed of an old woman standing by the roadside, holding a basket of akara. She looked at him and said softly, "Don't forget your mother." He brushed it off at first, but when he reached the park that morning, he saw a woman selling akara at the exact spot from his dream. Her wrapper was old, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the akara in hot oil. Without thinking, he walked over and gave her all the money he had in his pocket. She looked up in surprise. "Ah, my son, why are you giving me this?" He smiled faintly. "Because I still have a mother." That day, his taxi never broke down. He made more than he had in weeks. He went home believing he had seen I. In another part of the city, a woman named Dupe sat by her window in Surulere, crying quietly. She had sent her aged mother to live in the village years ago, too busy chasing business deals to visit her. But that week, she kept hearing the same song on every radio station she tuned to, an old Yoruba lullaby she hadn't heard since childhood. It felt like a message. She tried to ignore it, but the next morning, her little daughter came running to her, singing the same tune. "Mummy, I don't know why the song came to me in my dream," the child said innocently. Dupe dropped her pen and phone and broke into tears. She booked a ticket to Abeokuta the next day. When she reached the village, her mother was sitting outside her hut, weaving a mat. The old woman looked up and smiled weakly. "You remembered me." Dupe fell to her knees and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry, Mama." That evening, as the sun set behind the palm trees, she heard the faint sound of a lullaby carried by the wind. She looked around, but no one was there. The villagers said it was Aya Ice Blessing. Back in Lagos, the priest who had once spoken with the wife visited the abandoned mansion. He came quietly, carrying a small bottle of holy oil and a Bible. He sprinkled the oil around the garden and whispered a prayer. But when he turned to leave, he saw something that made him stop. By the corner of the compound, where the grave had been, a small tree had begun to grow. Its leaves were bright green, even though it was a dry season. He knelt beside it, touched the soil, and smiled. "Peace lives here now," he murmured. He built a small wooden bench beside the tree. Soon, people began to visit. Some came to pray. Others came just to sit in silence. They said the air there was different, cool and calm, like the heart of a river. Within a year, the place became known as Agbo-Ai, the Mother's Grove. Mothers came from across Nigeria to pray for their children there. Some brought palm oil, some brought flowers, some just brought their tears. They said if you knelt there and called your child's name, peace would follow them wherever they went. One afternoon, a group of school children came on an excursion. Their teacher, a young woman named Funk, told them the story again as they sat beneath the small tree. Her voice was calm, almost musical. You see, children, when you hurt the one who gave you life, you hurt the earth itself. But when you love your mother, heaven opens a road for you. A little boy raised his hand shyly. Auntie, where did the mother go after she forgave them? Funk smiled softly. They say she went where true mothers go. Back to the wind, back to the prayers of those who remember. The children nodded solemnly. Some looked at the sky. The smallest one whispered, Thank you, I. Later that evening, as Funk locked the gate of Grove, she felt a soft breeze pass her ear and heard a voice so faint it might have been her imagination. Thank you for telling my story. She turned quickly, but no one was there. The air smelled faintly of flowers. By nightfall, a full moon hung over Lagos. The city lights glimmered like scattered stars. In countless homes, mothers told the story to their children before bed. Once upon a time, there was a woman who gave everything to her child. And when he forgot her, she walked the earth to remind him that love never dies. And each time the story was told, something in the listeners changed. Pride softened. Anger cooled. Love grew. In the weeks that followed, newspapers began to publish the legend as a folktale of redemption. Churches and mosques spoke about it in sermons. Even the radio stations that once mocked ghost stories began to play songs dedicated to Aya I. On one popular talk show, an elderly woman called in. Her voice trembled with age but carried strength. My children stopped talking to me years ago, but after this story came out, they came to visit me with gifts. They said they remembered the woman who came back from the grave. I don't know who she was, but I thank her spirit. Because of her, my house has laughter again. Across Lagos, relationships began to heal. Families started small reconciliation dinners. Old quarrels were settled. A woman in Ajagunal knelt before her aged mother and said, Forgive me, Mama. I don't want the ghost of Aya to visit me in my dreams. Her mother laughed through tears and hugged her. Ah, you've already been visited, my daughter, but not by fear, by wisdom. In Ibadan, a group of university students organized a cultural night titled The Mother Who Returned. They performed a play about love, greed, and forgiveness. When the play ended, the audience was silent for a long time before breaking into applause. Many wept openly. The next morning, the students found an envelope on their stage. Inside was a single flower, red and fresh, still dripping water. No one knew who left it. They placed it at the foot of a tree and bowed. Months later, during the first anniversary of the mansion's peace, hundreds gathered at Agbo I. There were drummers, singers, and dancers. Women wore white wrappers and carried baskets of flowers. Men brought gifts of yam and oil. The priest stood before them and raised his hands. Today, he said, we remember not the curse, but the mercy that came after. We remember a mother who turned her pain into light. The crowd echoed, eh? Then the drummers began to play a soft rhythm. The women started to sing the old lullaby again, the one that followed the story from beginning. The sound rose into the air, blending with the wind. As the song filled the night, a gentle breeze passed through the crowd. Some swore they saw a faint shimmer near the small tree, like someone standing there in the light. Others said it was only the moon. But every heart there felt the same peace. When the ceremony ended, the crowd began to leave slowly, carrying with them the moral that had changed their lives. A young mother lifted her baby high and whispered, You will never forget me. An old man told his son, Honor me now while I still breathe. And the son hugged him tight. By the time the last person left, the grove was quiet again. The moonlight fell softly on the small tree. Dew gathered on its leaves. If you had stood there long enough, you might have heard a soft humming in the air, the lullaby of a woman who had finally become more than a ghost, more than a story. She had become a lesson carried in every mother's prayer, in every child's heart, in every city wind that whispered through the night. And so, the story of the couple who killed their mother for money no longer lived in fear or shame. It lived as a warning, a mirror, and a light, because across Lagos, across Ibadan, across every home where the story was told, people learned to say softly, almost like a prayer before sleep, You can bury a mother's body, but never her love. And somewhere unseen but near, Ai smiled. They say stories do not die. They only rest between mouths. When the moon rises over Lagos, you can still hear the old ones telling of the woman who came back from the grave to teach her children what love means. The tale has grown like a tree whose roots drink from every household. It began as whispers, then became sermons, then became celebration. In the years that followed her forgiveness, the name Aya I spread beyond the markets and the churches until it reached even the offices where people once forgot how to kneel and thank their mothers. It was the elders of Ibadan who first suggested a day of remembrance. They met beneath the big almond tree in Maple Hall Yard. The oldest among them, Baba Alade, spoke slowly so that every word would find its seat. We have told the story. We have warned our children. But warning is not enough. Let us build a day that will make their hearts remember even when their ears forget. The others nodded. A day for mothers, someone said. A day for forgiveness, another added. Then we shall call it Ojo Ai, the day of the mother of the earth. News of the idea traveled like fire through dry grass. Churches announced it from pulpits. Imams mentioned it in Friday sermons. Market women discussed what cloth they would wear. In Lagos, radio presenters began to speak about it between songs. Remember your mother, they said in Yoruba and in English, for the ground remembers those who forget. Musicians composed short jingles filled with drums and gentle flutes. Even school children started practicing songs for the coming festival. When the first Ojo Ai arrived, the city looked different. The sky itself seemed to shine brighter, as though the heavens approved. Women tied white wrappers and placed flowers in their hair. Men wore simple clothes and carried small calabashes of water to symbolize cleansing. At dawn, church bells rang in harmony with the mosque calls. For once, everyone moved in the same rhythm. They said the spirit of Aya had brought peace strong enough to quiet even Lagos traffic. At the center of the celebration stood the small tree in the old mansion's garden, now tall and wide enough to shade a crowd. People came from far away, bringing food, stories, and songs. Elders told the tale again. How greed had blinded a couple, how love had walked out of a grave to open their eyes, and how mercy had watered the soil until the curse turned into blessing. Children listened with open mouths, some holding their mothers' hands tightly, as if afraid to ever let go. Before midday, the crowd gathered around the tree. The priest who once prayed there was now gray-haired and slow, but his voice still carried across the air. Beside him stood an imam, a traditional chief, and a teacher. Today, the priest began, we do not speak of death, but of birth, the birth of wisdom that came from a mother's pain. The imam lifted his hands. May every home remember that paradise lies at the feet of mothers. The chief poured a libation onto ground and said in Yoruba, the earth accepts the tears of the pure. May this land never forget her lesson. The people answered together, Ayezi. Then came the songs. First a lullaby, slow and soft, then faster rhythms that made everyone dance. Old women clapped. Young men beat talking drums. Children jumped in circles shouting, Aya, we thank you. The sound rolled through the neighborhood like a tide of joy. Those who passed by stopped to watch, smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes without knowing why. As evening approached, small fires were lit. Around each fire sat families sharing stories. One man spoke of how the tale had changed him. I used to shout my mother, he confessed. But the night I heard the story on the radio, I dreamed she was walking away from me with a heavy basket on her head. I woke up and went straight to her house at dawn. Now every Sunday I cook for her. The crowd clapped and laughed softly. Another woman said she had forgiven her own daughter after years of silence. I remember that forgiveness is a final gift of love, she said. If the dead can forgive, why not the living? As the fires crackled, the storyteller of the village rose. A woman with hair white as cotton and eyes that had seen many rains. Her name was Mama Titi. And when she spoke, the whole field grew quiet. Children of the earth, she began, this story you celebrate is older than you think. In every land, a mother's spirit guards her children. But here, in our own soil, one mother chose to walk again so we would remember. She came not with thunder or blood, but with the patience of rain. She turned pain into lesson, death into mercy, and curse into seed. That is why we gather, not to fear, but to give thanks. She paused and looked toward the sky. The moon was rising, full and golden. When you leave this place tonight, she continued, go home and touch your mother's feet. If she has gone to the ancestors, pour water on the ground and say, I remember. If you are a mother, forgive the child who has forgotten you. And if you are a child, forgive the mother who could not give you all you wanted. That is the way the earth heals itself. A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Mothers began to embrace their children. Old quarrels melted in tears. Even strangers found themselves greeting one another like family. The night filled with the smell of roasted corn, jollof rice, and palm wine. Drums echoed far into the distance. Some said they saw faint lights dancing above the tree, like fireflies, but brighter. The elders smiled. Those are her eyes, they whispered. She is watching. When midnight came, the drums quieted. Everyone knelt. The chief held a small lamp and spoke the final blessing. Let no child sleep tonight with anger in his heart. Let no mother close her eyes in pain. As long as we remember Ai, peace will not leave our land. Then he placed a lamp at the foot of the tree. Its light flickered gently, and the wind that passed through carried the scent of flowers. The people went home slowly, singing the lullaby under their breath. Some walked hand in hand. Others carried their sleeping children on their backs. Across the city, the air felt lighter, as if the streets themselves had been washed clean. The next morning, Lagos woke without its usual noise. Drivers greeted one another politely. Traders shared space without quarrel. It was as though the spirit of the festival had settled over everyone. From that year on, Ojo Aya became a tradition. Every second week of August, the bells and drums would call again. Schools taught the story as part history lessons. Pupils learned the lullaby in Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. They drew pictures of the mother, the sun, and the tree. In markets, women painted her name on their stalls for blessing. Even companies began to organize charity drives in her honor, giving food to widows and gifts to elderly women. The city, once known only for its noise and hurry, found a new rhythm, one that beat with gratitude. Some years later, a journalist from America visited Lagos during the festival. She expected chaos but found harmony. She wrote an article titled, The City That Forgave Itself. It told how a single folktale turned a tragedy into a national song. When the piece spread online, tourists began to come just to witness the celebration. They sat under the tree, listened to the drums, and felt the quiet power that comes when a whole people remember their roots. In Ibadan, where the idea began, the elders kept their own smaller version of the day. They called it simply the Night of the Lamp. On that night, families placed small lamps on their doorsteps to honor the mothers who had gone ahead. As the city lights flickered one by one, it looked as if stars had fallen to earth. From the hills of Okadu to the markets of Bodija, a warm glow filled the streets. The air hummed with prayers whispered in many tongues. As the years passed, the story no longer belonged to one family, but to everyone. Scholars wrote books about it. Artists painted murals of the mother's forgiving smile. Musicians composed songs mixing talking drums with violins, carrying her name to faraway lands. But through all the retellings, the heart of the story never changed. That love is stronger than greed, and that a mother's forgiveness can heal even the deepest wound. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind moved through the palm trees of Lagos Island, people swore they heard her song again. Not sad, not haunting, just a gentle hum, like a lullaby wrapped in peace. The old said it was the wind. The young said it was memory. But those who had truly listened to the story knew it was gratitude. The earth itself singing back to the woman who had once wept upon it. And so the tale of the couple who killed their mother for money ended not in darkness, but in light. It became a circle, passing from generation to generation, reminding each new ear that wealth without heart turns to dust, and that forgiveness, once planted, grows forever. Now, when night falls and the moon rises over Lagos, the storytellers begin again, their voices slow and warm. Children of tomorrow, listen well. Once, in our own land, greed tried to bury love. But love, like the seed of the Irako, cannot die. It will sprout again, even from the hardest ground. And the children answer softly, "We remember." Then the storyteller smiles and closes the circle with the words everyone now knows by heart. You can bury a mother's body, but never her love. And somewhere unseen but near, the wind sighs approval. The everlasting breath of Aya, Mother the Earth. The elders used to say that peace is like water in a calabash. If you walk carelessly, it will spill. For many seasons after the first Ojo Aya, the city walked gently. Children remembered, mothers smiled, and even the stubborn men of Lagos learned to greet the morning with gratitude. But time is a patient thief. Slowly, memory began to fade, and where memory sleeps, greed wakes. It began when the governor of Lagos, a man called Alhaji Karim Alawo, decided that the festival had grown too powerful to leave in the people's hands. One evening, as the sun fell over the lagoon, he sat with his advisors in the government house, sipping cold malt and fanning himself. Every year they gather, he said, singing this woman's name, dancing under that tree. Millions of naira move around, yet the state earns nothing. Shouldn't we make it official? Register it, control it, expand it. His advisors nodded eagerly. One of them, a sharp-tongued man in glasses, added, "Your Excellency, if we brand it as a Lagos International Mothers Festival, foreign sponsors will come. You can even give a speech, talk about mothers and progress. The cameras will love it." The governor smiled, his gold tooth catching the light. Yes, a little speech, a few donations, and the people will praise me. We will build a stage near that sacred tree, paint the place, maybe even sell tickets. We'll show the world how Lagos celebrates culture. But one older advisor, quiet until now, cleared his throat. "Sir, the people say the place belongs to the spirit of Aya. Should we not seek the elders' blessing first?" The governor laughed so loud the lizards on the wall fled. "Spirit? My friend, this is 21st century Lagos. Spirits do not sign contracts. Money does." The others joined in his laughter, and that was how the trouble began. Within weeks, bulldozers rolled toward Agbo Aya. They tore down the small wooden fence the priest had built and replaced it with metal gates. Billboards rose overnight, bright colors shouting coming soon. The first Lagos International Mothers Festival. Beneath the text was the governor's smiling face, wide and proud. The people murmured, "Why should government own what the mothers built?" Asked a trader in mile 12. "Let them take taxes from roads and markets, not from sacred ground." But some were pleased. "At least the festival will be bigger," they said. "Maybe it will bring jobs." And so division entered where unity once lived. The priest, now frail and walking with a cane, went to see the governor. He waited in the hot corridor of the government house for hours until finally he was allowed in. "Your Excellency," he began softly, "the festival is not like others. It was born from forgiveness, not fame. If you turn it into business, the peace may not stay." The governor waved his hand. "Old man, don't worry. We'll honor your spirit woman properly. I'll even build a statue of her, 12 feet tall, marble. Imagine tourists taking pictures, paying fees. You priests will thank me later." The priest sighed. "Statues do not replace sincerity, sir. Aya listens to hearts, not to speeches." But the governor had already turned his phone. When the priest left, clouds were gathering. By nightfall, a strange wind swept through Lagos. Power lines shook, lights flickered, and dogs barked for hours without reason. Those who lived near the lagoon said they heard a woman singing, a slow, mournful tune, though no singer could be found. The next morning, workmen arrived to clear the garden for the grand stage. As they dug into the soil near the sacred tree, one of them struck something hard. "Probably old stones," he said, bending to check. But when he brushed away the dirt, he found a clay pot sealed with cowrie shells. Inside were dried flowers and a folded piece of cloth. Out of curiosity, he opened it and screamed. The earth trembled. A gust of wind knocked the tools in their hands, and the air filled with the smell of rain though the sky was clear. The foreman shouted, "Close it! Cover it back!" But the wind tore through the site, scattering sand and leaves. When it stopped, the pot was gone, leaving only a hollow space that glowed faintly before fading. By evening, the workers refused to continue. "Oga, something lives in that ground," they said. But the project supervisor threatened to cut their pay. "You people believe too many stories," he barked. "Back to work tomorrow." The next day they returned. The machines wouldn't start. Every generator failed. The metal frames bent as if crushed by unseen hands. One crane toppled over without wind. Still, the governor's men insisted. "We'll finish before the festival," they said. No spirit can stop development. As preparations continued, invitations went out to ministers and ambassadors. The media buzzed with excitement. "A celebration of motherhood and unity," they said. Nobody mentioned the protests of the old priest or the whispers of the people. The night before the new festival, the governor held a banquet in his mansion. Laughter filled the hall. Champagne corks popped. They say Lagos never sleeps, but on this day it forgot even how to blink. The air was thick with music and perfume. Banners flapped above the crowded streets, and screens beamed the governor's smiling face across the island. 15 years had passed since the last warning, and people had grown bold again. They had built towers taller than church steeples, bridges that glowed blue at night, and voices louder than conscience. "Ojo Ai," the announcer shouted. The greatest Mother's Festival ever. The sacred tree still stood at the center of the park, older now, its leaves trembling above a sea of tents. Around its roots were cables, speakers, cameras. Vendors sold souvenirs carved in the shape of the tree, and little dolls they called Mother's Spirit. Children danced with balloons. Mothers took selfies, and nobody noticed a faint wind that circled the ground, whispering like breath on glass. From the main stage came drums and horns. The new governor, a younger man named Badejo, stood in white agbada trimmed with gold. He raised his hand, and the crowd roared. "My people," he began, "today we honor the woman who taught us forgiveness. Today we show the world that Lagos is the city of mothers and miracles." Cameras flashed. The governor smiled broadly, but sweat gleamed on his forehead. He glanced at the foreign dignitaries seated beside him, men in dark suits, women in sunglasses, and his chest swelled with pride. Behind him hung a huge screen, showing the slogan "Mothers Build Nations." Money had flowed freely for this festival. Sponsorships, television rights, tourism. Yet among the crowd were elders who watched silently. They shook their heads and whispered. "They have turned memory into merchandise again." The old priest had died years ago, but one of his apprentices, now gray-bearded himself, stood near the tree clutching a bottle of water and murmuring prayers. The music grew louder, drowning everything. Dancers swirled in bright ankara. The governor waved to the cameras. "We will now unveil the new monument of Aya Ai," he declared. A red cloth-covered giant bronze statue behind him, her figure holding a child, face lifted to the sky. "May she bless Lagos forever." Trumpets sounded. Assistants pulled the cloth away. For a heartbeat, the statue shone beautifully in the sun. Then a gust of hot wind swept through the park. The cloth blew high into the air, twisting like flame. The music faltered. People shielded their eyes. The governor tried to laugh. "Even the wind rejoices," he said. But the sky had changed. Clouds gathered fast, thick and low, dimming the noon light. The giant screens flickered. The sound from the speakers warped into static. Birds that had been circling above scattered in all directions. Someone shouted, "Rain!" Another said, "No, it's dust." The wind turned cold. Paper cups, leaves, and flags spun wildly. Mothers pulled their children close. The governor raised both hands. "Remain calm," he shouted into the microphone, but his voice cracked. Lightning flashed behind the stage, not white, but pale gold, like sunlight seen through water. Then silence, total heavy silence. Even the wind held its breath. The air smelled of earth after rain, though the ground was dry. Slowly, every head turned toward the sacred tree. A single leaf drifted down, glowing faintly. It touched the soil and vanished in a ripple of light. The cables around the tree sparked once and went dark. Out of that stillness, a soft humming began, the same old lullaby that had once traveled through Lagos years ago. No speakers played it. No band performed it. It came from the air itself. The elders fell to their knees. "It's her," they whispered. Ai has returned. The governor stared, mouth open. What trick is this? Light gathered at the base of the tree, small at first, then spreading upward like dawn rising from the ground. Within that light a shape formed, the outline of a woman. The crowd gasped as the glow cleared, and they saw her clearly for the first time in living daylight. She was not terrifying. She was calm, radiant, dressed in plain cloth the color of soil, her eyes deep as river water. Her feet were bare, yet wherever they touched, grass turned green. Children stopped crying. Babies laughed softly as if recognizing her. The governor fell backward onto the stage. Cameras clicked uncontrollably, yet every photograph later came out blank. Only light. She spoke, and her voice was both near and far. "Children of this land, why you forget so easily? I gave you peace, and you traded it for noise. I gave you a song, and you turned it into a market tune. Must the earth open again before you remember?" The crowd trembled. Some wept openly. Some knelt. Others stretched their hands toward her. The bronze statue behind the governor began to melt silently, flowing down like wax until nothing remained but a pool that reflected her face. She turned to the governor. "Leader of the city, you wear the cloth of honor but have sewn pride into its seams. Return this day to humility, or you will lead your people into shadow." He tried to speak, but no words came. His throat was dry, his tongue heavy. She looked over the crowd once more, her eyes kind yet filled with sorrow. "Tell your children this. When love becomes business, the earth grows hungry. Feed it again with truth." A roll of thunder answered her words, though the sky was clear. The light around her brightened until it was almost white. People covered their eyes. She lifted her hands slowly. A cool wind swept through the park, blowing the dust away, straightening the flags, carrying the scent of rain and flowers. Then, as gently as she had come, she faded into the brightness. The wind settled. The sun returned. When the crowd looked again, she was gone. Only the sacred tree remained, its leaves shining wet with dew that no one could explain. The people stood silent for a long time. Then one child, a little girl wearing beads, walked to the tree, touched the trunk, and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." Her small voice broke the spell. All around her, people began to kneel and pray. The drummers dropped their sticks. The foreign guests bowed their heads. But high above them, unseen, a faint shadow crossed the sun for an instant, and the storyteller who tells this tale will always pause here, lower their voice, and say, that was not the end. For when light touches shadow, something always answers. And that is where the story holds its breath, waiting for the final chapter. They say that after light touches the earth, the darkness learns how to kneel. When Ai stood beneath the midday sun, and the whole city saw her, Lagos held its breath. For a long while no one moved. The drums lay silent. The banners hung still, and the only sound was the rustle of the trees she had blessed. Then, as if remembering how to live, people began to weep, not from fear, but from the weight that pride had put upon their hearts. The governor knelt where she had spoken to him. His aides tried to lift him, but he shook his head. "Leave me," he said quietly. No crown is heavy enough to hide from the eyes of a mother. That day he resigned his post, and before sunset he went to markets of Lagos, walking alone, greeting strangers and apologizing to the poor whose taxes had built his vanity. Some mocked him. Most did not. They saw the change in his eyes and let him pass in peace. The people cleaned the park with their own hands. They carried away the twisted metal, the melted bronze, the broken screens. No one commanded them. They worked because their hearts told them to. When the ground was bare again, they planted flowers and small trees, not for profit, not for show, but to heal what had been wounded. That night no lights burned, yet the city glowed softly, as if the moon had multiplied itself into every window. Mothers sang the lullaby again. Fathers joined them quietly. Children who did not yet know the words hummed along. Across Ibadan and Lagos, even those who had not witnessed a miracle felt peace settle on their chests like a warm cloth. Days passed, then weeks. The newspapers stopped arguing about whether the apparition was real. The talk shows moved on, but the people remembered. The city's noise became gentler. Quarrels in the markets ended with laughter. Even the impatient drivers of Lagos began to slow when elders crossed the road. In Ibadan, the elders gathered at Maple Hall once more. The same almond tree stood there, wide as a roof. They sat beneath it and spoke in low voices. "It is finished," Baba Lade said. "Her work is done." The others nodded. "We must keep her story clean," they agreed, "so that no one will ever use it for greed again." And so they decided Ojo Aya would remain, but without sponsors or politicians. Each year the people would meet simply. No stages, no speeches, only gratitude. The mothers would lead, the children would sing, and the city would give thanks in silence before dawn. When the next festival came, it was unlike any other. No microphones, no cameras, only the sound of footsteps on cool earth. At sunrise, people stood facing the east. The priest's apprentice, now an old man with silver hair, poured water around the sacred tree and whispered, "Rest, Mother of the Earth." The breeze that passed through the crowd smelled of new rain. Someone began the lullaby, and soon thousands of voices joined, rising and falling like waves. The sound traveled across the lagoon, into the streets, into the hearts of those who listened from their homes. It felt as if the city itself was breathing again after years of holding its chest tight. When the song ended, there was stillness, and in that stillness, many swore they heard a soft sigh, content, like a mother watching her children finally sleep. After that day, the miracle stopped, but blessings remained. The tree never lost its leaves, not even in Harmattan. Water drawn from the ground nearby never ran dry. Those who came to grow with clean hearts found their paths clearer, their burdens lighter. The city did not become perfect, but it learned how to remember. Years rolled forward like calm waves. New governors came, new roads were built, but every second week of August, Lagos slowed down for one night. Buses stopped early, horns rested, and the wind carried songs instead of dust. The people called it the Night of Peace. Children born long after Aya Ice's last appearance grew up hearing her name the way one hears thunder far away, distant, yet certain. They learned to greet their mothers with gentleness and to thank the earth before planting their crops. And so, through stories told in markets and whispered in buses, her lesson became a heartbeat that never stopped. Now, my listener, you have followed this tale from its first cry to its last sigh. Hear me well. I am the old voice that carries memory across time. When I tell this story, I do not speak only of Lagos or Ibadan. I speak of every home where a mother's tears have watered the floor, of every heart that has once chosen pride over love. The mother in the story was flesh once, but now she is wind and wisdom. She walks where gratitude lives. When you greet the morning kindly, she smiles. When you turn your anger into forgiveness, she sits beside you unseen. But when you forget, when you raise your voice in pride or trade love for gain, she watches and waits, not with wrath, but with sorrow. So, before you sleep tonight, pour a little water on the earth. Whisper thank you to the one who carried you, fed you, scolded you, prayed for you. That is how you keep the peace you left behind. And if ever you stand beneath a quiet tree and hear the wind of a lullaby you do not know, do not be afraid. Bow your head and listen. It may be Aya passing again, counting the hearts that still remember, because a story ends only when its lesson is forgotten. And this tale of the mother who returned from death to teach her children life, will live as long as someone listens. So, my child, when you leave this fire, carry her words with you. You can bury a mother's body, but never her love. Now go in peace, and let the earth rest easy beneath your feet.